Welcome to the bottom of the world, the land of giants. Here at the very edge of the continent, South America reaches for Antarctica. Cold deserts stretch endlessly, glaciers slice through the mountain range, and ancient forests and clear lakes mirror an untamed sky. This is Patagonia, a remote land that once guarded a secret lost in time. Looking at old maps, you'll discover a curious detail: giants and mythical creatures. For centuries, they appeared on nearly every map of the region. That's why it was labeled the land of giants. Until suddenly, they vanished without a trace. This is a story about how real people were transformed into legends and then completely erased from history. It is the tale of the forgotten giants of South America's most rugged wilderness. To unravel the mystery of its people, we must first understand the remarkable region that gave birth to this legend. Patagonia stretches across southern Argentina and Chile, like a forgotten world at the edge of the South American continent. It is a land of contradictions and a place where an astonishing variety of ecosystems exists side by side, all within a single territory. Cold and windswept deserts dominate much of the region, and that is why the area is barely inhabited by humans, and this detail will play a significant role later on in our story. Very few people ever venture into these expanses, which have remained largely unchanged for centuries. A vast wilderness where the horizon seems to extend forever, dwarfing anything that moves across its surface. The desert meets the mountains abruptly at Torres del Paine in Chile, where granite peaks, icy mountain lakes, and golden grasslands create a striking landscape. The park's gigantic spires have become a symbol of the Patagonian wilderness, towering like stone giants over the surrounding area. The higher you go, the more rugged the environment becomes. The scale of everything seems to expand, as if entering a land built for beings much larger than humans. Turquoise lakes dot the terrain below the mountains, their color coming from finely ground rock particles suspended in glacial meltwater. These massive granite formations stand like ancient sentinels. But the most iconic landmark is without a doubt Mount Fitzroy, which towers above the other mountains. Its appearance is brutal, like jagged teeth of stone have been pushed upwards by tectonic forces. Its steep granite face a challenge even for the most expert climbers. At its base you find a postcard view that makes one of South America's most photographed mountain scenes. Its distinctive silhouette stands out sharply against the sky, a gigantic presence dominating everything. Behind these mountains lies something extraordinary. Another reminder of a forgotten era. The southern Patagonian icefield is the largest glacial system found anywhere outside of Antarctica and Greenland. This immense glacier stretches across 4,700 square miles. It has carved the landscape for millennia with the slow but unstoppable force of a sleeping giant. At its edge, the Perito Moreno glacier flows outward like a massive frozen river. It is one of the few glaciers in the world that is advancing rather than retreating, but that doesn't mean it's safe from disintegration. Massive chunks of its 240-foot ice wall regularly carve into the adjacent lake. When it happens, they create a thunderous sound that echoes across the valley, a reminder of nature's raw power in this land of extremes. Perhaps this ruthless and unforgiving landscape is what first planted the seeds of a myth about enormously large people that would captivate Europe for centuries. Along the western coast, narrow inlets cut into the land, and this network forms one of the world's most complex coastlines with thousands of islands and channels. The landscape transforms as you move inland toward the lake district of Bariloche. Here, crystal clear lakes reflect the mountain peaks, and forest trees create a landscape that early German settlers found reminiscent of Bavaria. The surrounding region offers a slightly gentler face of Patagonia, all beneath the gaze of the Andean mountains. Amid this diversity stands the Valvidian rainforest. It is the third largest temperate rainforest in the world, second only to the Amazon and the Congo. Within these woodlands grow some of the oldest living organisms on the planet. It is believed that the world's oldest tree stands here as well. Moss-covered and mysterious, those temperate rainforests exist in stark contrast to the dry plains only miles away. For European explorers, this was one of the last truly unknown places, kind of like a blank space on their maps where anything seemed possible. The few people who ventured this far south returned with very unusual tales, and for over 250 years, one story dominated all others, that this remote land was home to a race of giants who towered over ordinary men. The story begins when 5 European ships ventured out from Spain in the year 1519, eventually anchoring in what is now Argentina the following year. The expedition was led by Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese navigator on his quest to circle the entire planet. When the European explorers landed in America, they encountered indigenous people of extraordinary stature. Many people respect him as the very first globetrotter, but only very few know about his dark secrets. In his journal, a crew member described a man so tall that a European would reach only to his waist. Magellan named these people Patagones, a name that likely referred to their supposedly large feet. And soon all maps across Europe bore a label, the region of giants, and the land itself became known as Patagonia. Today, Magellan's legacy lives on in the names of countless geographical features and species throughout the region. The most famous is undoubtedly the Strait of Magellan, the navigable sea route separating South America from Tierra del Fuego. This archipelago at the continent's southernmost tip exists in a subpolar oceanic climate where life has adapted to some of Patagonia's most extreme conditions. Rugged mountains rise dramatically from the sea, their peaks often shrouded in clouds. The discovery of this passage provided sailors with a sheltered alternative to the notoriously dangerous waters around Cape Horn, forever changing maritime travel between the Atlantic and the Pacific. But actually, it's the creatures named after Magellan that really capture our imagination. The Magellanic penguin is one of the most recognizable species bearing the explorer's name. These birds breed along the coasts of Argentina, Chile, and the Falkland Islands with distinctive white bands running from their eyes to their chests. They form huge colonies and can dive over 75 meters deep when hunting fish. During migration, these birds can swim up to 4,000 kilometers between their breeding grounds and feeding areas. Perhaps the most striking, however, is the Magellanic woodpecker, the largest of its kind in South America, with its brilliant red head and powerful bill that can be heard echoing through the Patagonian forests. These birds measure up to 45 centimeters in length and use their beaks to strip bark from trees in search of food. They communicate through distinctive drumming patterns that can be heard over a kilometer away. It might not be obvious, but animals like these are super important for the region. Their presence indicates healthy, mature forest ecosystems, making them a very important indicator species for conservation in the woodlands. But even if those explorers named amazing animals and things after them, we gotta remember that their methods were often far from what is considered honorable nowadays. Magellan was determined to bring back living evidence of the distant lands he explored, and in the 16th century, this ambition sadly extended beyond collecting plants and animals, and the story takes a bit of a dark turn here. He ordered his men to capture 2 of the indigenous giants and bring them back to Europe to prove his discovery. Kidnapping is definitely not cool, and this would bear no fruit. Magellan himself would receive payback pretty instantly, and karma wasn't gentle with him. Most of his expedition was killed in the Philippines before completing their voyage. Only 1 out of 5 ships returned, and sadly, the captured Patagonian natives also didn't make it during the long journey, and without living proof, all that remained was a story that would take a life of its own. For the next 2 centuries, more expeditions ventured to South America, and the Spanish, English, Dutch and French explorers all reported encounters with these giants, even though their accounts often contradicted each other. The unique location and relative isolation of Patagonia created the perfect conditions for such stories to flourish. You see, only very few Europeans could ever verify these claims firsthand. Those who did arrive came expecting giants. And human perception has a way of finding what it expects to see. I mean, it was the 16th century and science was still developing, notoriously inaccurate and often mixed with superstition and fantasy. I mean, it was pretty absurd. At that time, maps would virtually show sea monsters in unexplored waters, and science and fantasy commonly blurred together. What is fascinating is how the giants seem to grow taller with each new account. The explorers' original description suggested men perhaps like 7 feet tall, but by the mid-18th century, the reported height of Patagonian giants had reached absurd proportions, some claiming 10 to 12 feet tall. For perspective, the tallest person reliably recorded in modern history was just like under 8 feet. The average European at that time stood around like 5'5". And I guess against this standard, even a 6-foot indigenous person would appear like remarkably tall. But giants of like 10 feet, something really didn't add up at all. Until the story took a very unexpected turn. All of a sudden, a proper scientist entered the picture, and in the 1800s, the world's most famous biogeographer Charles Darwin also ventured to Patagonia aboard the legendary HMS Beagle. After meeting several supposed giants, Darwin offered a simple explanation and concluded their height simply appears greater than it really is. I mean, he was the most respected scientist at that time, so he must have had a pretty valid point, right? You see, as science improved, more researchers began questioning the status quo. A French scientific journal eventually accused British explorers of fabricating their giant stories entirely, and the giants began to shrink dramatically. And then something unexpected happened. They began to disappear entirely from scientific literature. But the story takes another pretty odd turn. Something even more disturbing was happening to the actual people who inspired those legends. But before I reveal how giants ended up simply forgotten in history, I wanted to give a very important shout out to the people who made today's video possible. Let's be honest, being an independent creator and making videos like this is super challenging. Researching all of the information to create an engaging story takes me ages, not to mention all of the time it takes finding the footage and to edit the video. And that is why I'm grateful for sponsors like Artlist, who keep the lights on and provide all of the tools I need to bring those stories to life. I use them for almost all of my projects for like 5 years now. Their new generative AI feature is a game changer for my workflow, and I'll show you how I used it to sketch out the storyboard for this entire video. So on the Artlist platform, you'll find a brand new tab that says AI Photo and Video. Below they give you a bunch of presets. So I simply typed in Patagonia Desert, then I clicked Enhance, which makes my prompt more sophisticated. In my specific case, I created a lot of those pictures to fill a storyboard, and that helped me to visualize everything. If you do other types of videos that don't require actual physical shooting like this one, you can animate these images and turn them into a video. What I found particularly impressive is that I can describe an actual location, and it looks much like the actual real-life shot which I picked for this video. But Artlist is so much more than an AI tool. They complement this with a massive library of awesome music. Another super cool feature lets you track trending songs on YouTube and Spotify, and you instantly find royalty-free music to match. So for example, this week those songs are trending, I just gotta click here and voila, the platform suggests a ton of similar songs, which is super awesome and convenient. Paid plans start at $10 if you just want the music. If you want to take advantage of the new tools, you can select the AI Suite plan, which is $30. However, I personally recommend Artlist Max, which has all of the features included for only a little more. The link below gets you 2 months for free, which makes the deal even sweeter. Seriously, in 2025, you gotta check out Artlist. Now, with that said, back to our story. The people themselves didn't vanish, but their portrayal as giants did. The indigenous people Magellan encountered were actually from a tribe called Tehuelche, and they still exist today, though in greatly reduced numbers. They were indeed very tall, and specifically by 16th century European standards, many standing over 6 feet. Their physical proportions and clothing combined with the gigantic landscape created the perfect conditions for exaggeration, especially to Europeans who only spotted them from the distance most of the time. The same is true for all the stuff that was drawn on the maps. Those sea monsters were likely only a corrupted version of actual animals that were encountered. So probably sailors saw a whale from a distance without actually scientifically dissecting one. They used a bit of artistic freedom and imagination to turn them into sea monsters with horns and this kind of stuff. So that made it on the maps, and the same was true for the indigenous giants. As people became less ignorant, the scientific community completely overreacted. Rather than acknowledging the facts, these details were dismissed entirely as fiction. But as the giants and monsters were being erased from maps and literature, the actual people faced a far more devastating reality. Their population began a steep decline that continued to this very day. It is very reminiscent to what happened to the tribes of Northern America basically. European diseases swept through their communities as the locals had no immunity to foreign illness, their territories became divided by national borders, and a nomadic lifestyle became impossible. Today only a few descendants remain. Their language is nearly extinct, with just a handful of native speakers left. And sadly, the culture that once inspired tales of giants has been pushed to the brink of disappearance. So unfortunately, this tale doesn't really have a happy ending, but it has a very important lesson. This story tells us that truth is often a little bit sketchy. I mean, it can be constructed and sometimes even erased entirely. Those Patagonian giants, they weren't a fabrication to be exact. They were a mirror image of this brutal, untamed landscape and began simply as an exaggeration of impressively tall indigenous people by shorter Europeans. But this initial misperception was then amplified through centuries of retelling each account, making the claims more unbelievable. Even today, we see how established facts can change quite dramatically when viewed through different lenses or measured with better tools. So definitely don't believe everything people tell you and always cross-check what you hear in the news. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, you might also want to check out that one right here, which talks about an invisible line that parts Indonesia. If you want to hang out in the future, feel free to subscribe. And with that said, I hope you have a good day and I will see you in the next one.